I want to kind of take a deep dive a little bit this morning into what I've often called the ground of being, the ground of our psyche, however you want to think about. But by using the word the ground, what I'm trying to get at is not necessarily something that's spatially lower or higher or anything like that, but it's a sense of the deepest, the foundation of our entire experience of being, the foundation of our entire psyche, both conscious and unconscious. This sort of foundation. As I said, one of the challenges when I've talked about this before is because the use of every concept that we can use to describe something has a certain limitation. And like I said, a term like the ground has the possible limitation there is if we think about it in a sort of a spatial sense. So as I said, if we think of the ground as sort of underneath or below, that's not really the way I'm using it. I'm just using it as the most foundational, the essence of who we are. That's another way of putting it. But let's start where we all start, which is with our little ticker tape minds and our egos and our beliefs and our preferences and our ideas and our opinions and all of that. That's where everybody starts, by the way. And so, as I said, when we were meditating to begin the day, there's a reason that we begin these Sunday morning community practices with meditation, because that itself is I'm trying to communicate something through the arrangement, through the ordering of how all this happens, right? So by having the meditation basically is the first thing that we do in the morning, I'm trying to convey that this teaching, I think any good, deep form of spirituality, has its basis, right, in a practice, right, in something we do, not something we believe, think. Its basis isn't in philosophy. Its basis isn't in theology of any kind whatsoever. It's in something we do, an actual practice, which is actually what kind of attracted me many, many, many years ago in my late teens, early 20s, to Zen. I liked Zen. One of the things I liked about it is that I could tell that it wasn't. There are some very profound and subtle, philosophy that you can find in Zen, and of course with Buddhism especially. But in Zen, there is this emphasis on the practice. It's like, well, we can sit around thinking about this stuff all day long. We can talk about it all day long, but it's much better that we actually do it. And that was a real gift that I got from Zen, that there is something that I could actually do of my own initiative, on my own if I wanted to. I could join other people to do it also. But I was really sort of attracted to that this is something we actually do. So when I have meditation as the beginning, of course, meditation is by no means the end-all and be-all of spirituality, even contemplative spirituality, but it's the foundation. Because without an actual practice, if we're not actually putting our spirituality into consistent practice daily, then really what we have is a philosophy. We have a bunch of spiritual ideas, right? That we're doing whatever we do with those ideas, right? So in this teaching, I try to borrow from my own Zen background, which I appreciated so much, I think spirituality has to be founded on a kind of practice. I don't mean to say it has to be meditation necessarily. Meditation has been historically and across, across all sorts of boundaries of different religions, different spiritual systems, different cultures, all of that. So often you see meditation when it comes to some form of meditation, when it comes to the deep contemplative dive into our consciousness. Meditation is almost always part of that, right? There's ritual. There's the communal or community part of spirituality and religion, and all of which is important. But that foundational aspect, since what we're doing in this kind of, I call it contemplative spirituality, just to bring home the idea that this is a sort of contemplative endeavor. Meditating, inquiry, in spiritual inquiry is actually a contemplative endeavor. It's not essentially overly intellectualized or conceptualized. Inquiry starts with a question, but the question is meant to take us into a deeper level of experience, right? The questions of spirituality in the deepest sense, they're not meant just to get a bunch of answers. Of course, we can always get answers to any question that we have. We just turn on the internet, go to the bookstore. There's always going to be somebody that's more than happy to provide us the answers to almost any question we have. Whether those are real answers or not, or imagined, is a whole other issue. But we can do that, right? But have you ever noticed, like, just getting answers to things doesn't really address that deep spiritual instinct within us, right? We can get lots of answers. We can have a lot of fancy philosophies in our heads. Most people do. But that in and of itself doesn't mean we actually have any more depth than we started with. Not that spirituality is in any sense, at least as I teach it, in any sense anti-intellectual. I think the intellect is a very important part of the component with all this. We're just utilizing the intellect, utilizing our intelligence in a way that's kind of a little counterintuitive, right? Because we've been taught to utilize our intelligence in a particular way, right? When we've gone through schooling for the better part of a couple of decades. And it kind of teaches us how to use our mind in a particular way. When we get into spirituality, we're utilizing our mind. We're certainly utilizing sort of critical thinking, but in a little bit different way, right? We're not going from one concept to another to arrive at a grand concept, right? A grand sort of conceptual understanding. In spirituality, we're not shooting for a grand conceptual understanding. A lot of people would like it to be that way, and I'm sure a lot of people are aiming at that. But in its deepest sense, it certainly isn't what awakening or enlightenment's about, to get a great conceptual understanding. It's a deep dive into our immediate experience of being. And the thing that often distracts us from this deep dive into an immediate experience of being is we tend to think about our experience rather than just experience our experience. So, and this is so habituated that we don't even know we're doing it almost. Like it's just the thing that the most human beings do, and they have some experience. They almost immediately start to talk to themselves about the experience, interpret the experience. And again, there's a time and a place to do that. But generally, that's almost all most human beings are doing, instead of actually just an immediate encounter with the moment. So all these sort of awareness practices that we hear in spirituality, mindfulness and mindful eating and mindful drinking and mindful this and mindful that, and all these attempts to be more conscious, which is really what's behind them. They're all methodologies to heighten our awareness so that we become aware of a whole host of things that we normally don't even notice, or we notice very peripherally. But this deep dive, right? This deep dive into our own psyche. That's what we're doing in this, in any real, I think, legitimate attempt to discover what spiritual awakening is, or the ground of our own being.